I wonder, how did I get so jaded about the draft process?
I don't know. I mean,
well, follow me here because I've got kind of a thing I want to walk through.
Did Aaron Maben do it for you?
Oh, no. It starts way before that. I started putting my thoughts together. Oh, Chris just gave me the thumbs up. We're live?
Yeah, we got it figured out.
Live.
Welcome, everybody. Yes, I can't wait.
We are live.
We're live, and we're in unprecedented territory because
We've also never done this before.
No, we've never done this
Going
before.
live.
And also,
probably because or use of certain four-letter words and other racial undertones. That
I don't use those. What? Okay,
Oh,
look at that hair. Listen,
Yeah.
look at that hair and tell
Yeah.
me he's not just itching to be a Hitler Youth.
Yeah,
Get
but
outta
he
here.
doesn't have blue eyes and blonde hair.
So before we Chris in the first live podcast, you have made me the most a drink in the most effeminate glass that you could find in your repertoire. What am I holding in my hand here?
It's a snifter.
Raise a glass. It's a snifter, he calls it.
But this is for Doug. Doug is a gin guy through
Gin.
and through. So
Yes.
for this, we're having gin for our guest.
Let's go.
It's a bee's knees.
There's honey, lime, gin.
I like it.
This is actually really drinkable. I'm not a gin fan. What do you got in here? Is that
It's
it?
honey syrup, gin, and lemon juice. You almost got it.
You
Damn.
did. I
Almost
know.
got it.
I know. It's like you drink these when you're taking a warm bath. There's no lights on. You just have candles lit, and you're drinking this in a nice warm bath because you're not feeling that well. And Krupnik is just too harsh.
And well, first of all, too harsh for who? Krupnik.
Krupnik.
Yeah, so you're not
Do
a
you-
bourbon drinker.
Listen, do you remember that though when we lived together?
Yes.
When you were sick, you get in a hot bath, as hot as you can stand it. You get in a hot bath and you take 3 shots of Krupnik and you sit in that bath for about 45 minutes. It'll cure AIDS. It'll cure anything.
Now imagine you're doing this in a house that you share with 3 other guys. Guys, welcome to the first live broadcast of the Rock Pile Report on YouTube. For
and
those
one female. Sorry, Marley.
For those of you who are joining us, we've just had delicious cocktails by Chris. And I just got done espousing the fact that I'm sick of the NFL draft. I'm tired. And I'm going to walk you through this. I think I'm jaded. I think I've become more cynical over the years. I'm going to start at the beginning, right? First of all, I think, Chris, that when we started this podcast, we cared. We cared about draft content. And we also firmly believed that the NFL draft is where you change your franchise. Mm-hmm. Every year, every team believes that first-round pick of theirs is going to be a guy who's going to change the franchise. Well, first of all, it's a fallacy in and of itself. If you're drafting in the bottom 20, let's say you're at the bottom 25, you're one of the last, what do you want to call it, 12 picks of the draft.
Sure.
So you already have a quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Chances are.
You probably already got a left tackle. You probably already have a good wide receiver on your team. So that checks the box of guy who throws the ball, guy who protects the guy who throws the ball, guy who catches the ball.
Which is the most important part of the game. Offense.
Well, this is it. And then you could alternate maybe guy who catches the ball with guy who pressures the quarterback. And you could say that's probably another really important factor of a team that is going to compete for something, right?
Sure.
But that's it. That's the hierarchy of every single good team, and I can't make it more simple than that. So I get sick and tired every year when all these smart people just talk themselves in the biggest circles you've ever seen, trying to convince. It's not even like they're trying to convince us anymore. It's almost like they're trying to convince themselves that all of this matters.
Well, why do you think ever since that the Super Bowl ended and that the ESPN and NFL Network have focused on the draft, why do you think the same teams keep coming up?
Yeah.
It's all the teams who need the quarterback and who need that to change their franchise around. Because if you hit that...
Outside of the 2018 draft, where we took Allen and Edmonds, can you point to a draft that dramatically changed the history of the Buffalo Bills?
I mean, you'd have to go back to the 80s when you got, Bruce Smith and Jim Kelly and Andre Reed and Thurman Thomas.
And would anyone know who Thurman Thomas and maybe Bruce Smith, but would anyone know who Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed are if it wasn't for Jim Kelly?
No.
And so this is where I become
Bruce Smith, yes.
Bruce Smith, yes. I've become jaded over the years about all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because you think about like from a podcasting sense, we've been covering this for so long. Also, just in life, like I want to go back to 2007, right? 2007. Let's think about where we were for the draft. You're going to like this poll. It's the first time I went out drinking at a bar for an NFL draft.
Is that the J.P. Lossman draft?
No. This is the year where you and I were working together at a collection agency called ACI.
ACI,
American
wow.
Courageous International. And me and Jim Eddy had just left a 8 to noon shift at the ACI offices in Hamburg.
Big dude
Now,
with
guys,
the glasses?
No, just so you guys know, Jim Eddy was a 63-year-old man with an 11-year-old son who got arrested for possession of cocaine along with some of our other coworkers at a party that got broken up by the cops because there was high school kids there.
Are you drunk, Mr. Hurley? Get off the stand.
This is it. He was Mr. Hurley.
He was.
He was the guy from Big Daddy on the stand.
He was.
He and I together went down to J.P. Fitzgerald's in Hamburg at noon on a Saturday to watch the NFL draft because it was still getting aired on TV on Saturdays.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to watch them make their three biggest picks in the first hour and a half, 2 hours. It was Marshawn Lynch, and then it was Posluszny, who fell inexplicably.
From Penn State.
Yeah, and then it was Trent Edwards. And by that point, it was like, all right, well, I'm getting hammered here. I should probably get some dinner. And then you guys showed up and rounded out the night. And I put in an 8-hour shift at the bar. In fact, I'll never forget that day because Jim, at one point, after downing a bucket of beers to his face, looks at his watch and goes, "Oh, Jesus, I'm supposed to be picking my kid up from basketball practice." I go, "Jim, your kid, like, you have a kid?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, he's 11. And then he called a cab to go pick it. I was like, what is your life? And then it was almost a referendum on what our lives and collections was.
I did. Did you smoke then?
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. What'd you smoke? I forgot.
Parliament Lights.
P-Funks, baby.
Because I was cheap.
P-Funk with the recessed filter. My
so,
man.
2009, we throw a house party. You lived there at the time. The Maben draft. It's a Saturday. Draft all day on Saturday. They do the whole thing in one shebang. And I remember being out there as the sun was setting, and you and Davini are trying to talk me into coming inside because, not even because you wanted me in the house, but because you guys needed the kitchen chair that I had taken outside back. You were like, dude, you can't just sit out here alone in the yard and drink by yourself.
Well, you're thinking of terrible drafts, man. That's why that you don't like it.
2011, the Bills had the third pick when we took Alabama's Marcel Darius. The bar manager at Tony Rome said it's the first time he's ever seen a grown man attempt a cartwheel indoors. Okay? I want that on record. And it's funny that it happened at Tony Rome's because Tony Rome's was a setting for a lot of debauchery, a lot of the trouble I got into in my 20s. It was also the place Chris and I met for the first time.
You met him at Tony Rome's?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Good.
man, that's just...
The Broncos and Ravens playoff game where it was the Mile High Miracle, or if you're Drew, the Mile High Miracle.
So we draft Marcel Darius, and then
Bama.
I don't even remember.
Terror.
Like the next day, I'm hungover in bed, just watching Aaron Williams and Kelvin Shepard get drafted because I can't function. I partied too hard that night. 2012, 2013. Now it's a Friday night affair. First round, everything's going to get done on Saturday. Stephon Gilmore with the 10th pick, and the following year, E.J. Manuel with the 16th pick. Just partied my face off. The Gilmore year ended with a buddy of mine and Bob Kateris's. We will leave him unnamed to spare him the shame.
That wasn't short round, was it?
No. A friend of ours, he was hiding in the bushes outside of the Ridge Road Denny's because he was too drunk to come inside and didn't want to get in trouble, so he called his mom to get him. He came inside for about 20 minutes, drank a cup of black coffee, and went back out to the bushes. He just looked, he goes, I'm going to go out to the bushes. And we were like, dude, if you're more comfortable out there, just go, man. Then E.J. Manuel year. We're there, we're partying. The Bills trade back. We draft E.J. Manuel, and you hear the air come out of that bar like someone popped a balloon, and all of a sudden we went from 150 people to 20.
That was the Geno Smith year.
Yep. And like it was proof that no one was really behind the E.J. Manuel pick. The bar cleared out almost immediately. No one stayed to celebrate. No one was happy about it. I guess when I think about these years, you're talking about the bad drafts, but here's what I want to point out. The draft was fun because it was a party and it was just like, hey, we're making our pick. And then the Bills are going to pick, and I can spend the rest of my night enjoying myself,
Sure.
talking about the pick with my friends, drinking, all of these things. Like, even if it stunk, it didn't matter. It was all over but the crying.
Right.
And you had the rest of the night to yourself. The draft has become a monstrosity.
I love it.
And I hate it.
No, I love it.
Now, the 2017 draft happened, Chris, and Doug was in attendance for that debacle. It was the year Chris and I decided we were going to try to do a live recording at my house during a draft party because the Bills were supposed to be drafting 10th overall. And they traded back from 10 to 27 to take Trey White. Chris, do you remember how unusable that audio was?
It wasn't unusable. It was the fact that you just got up from the table and went to the bar in the basement of the Poinciana house.
And just started yelling.
Yeah, yeah. He kept looking at me like, "Oh no, clip that." There's 20 people in the basement here. People are gonna know the choppy audio from the editing. No, just cut. No, it's a lot. We're doing a live thing.
Drew's
There's no
an
editing.
animal. Drew's not housebroken. Drew's an animal. Drew is a gorilla who throws poop at the wall. That is what he's gotten better that he's got married and has kids.
The next
but
day,
Drew is a gorilla who throws poop at a wall.
The next day, I sobered up and I messaged Chris. I go, "How much of that audio was usable?" He goes, "None of it." He goes, "It was a disaster." He goes, "Most of it's just you yelling at me to clip the audio and your friends swearing in the background." Reed sitting there quietly. Reed was like, "Oh, I'm not getting near a microphone."
See, here's the thing, though. But Drew's reaction is not wrong because if you're a franchise in the NFL who does not have that quarterback, and you trade out and you pass on one, it's infuriating because I'm so glad that you started in 2007 and then you went all the way back because if you look at what you just said, the majority of those high picks, your Gilmores, your Posluszny's, your Mabins, the majority of those picks were all defense. And guess what?
And they never mattered.
No, because you know what? Because you know what's the only thing that matters in the NFL? If you got that quarterback and you have a competent coach to pair with that quarterback, it does not matter what you have.
Now, and you're correct. And so that's why we're heading into this draft now. And the run-up to this draft has felt like the longest month of my life. Like, I'm not even willing to... There are so many people who make their money and get their clicks and their views off trying to pump everybody up on the fact that the draft matters. And I feel like I do a good job of giving smart people a platform to talk to people who want to hear that stuff. Realistically, I struggle to care because I've watched too much football where teams draft 1 million guys who should be good. They draft 1 million guys who go on to be good football players, and it doesn't matter at all because their team still stinks. And in fact, Stephon Gilmore and the Buffalo Bills might be one of the best pieces of like my Exhibit A. Great player.
Sure.
It's been all pro Stephon Gilmore.
Didn't matter.
But it didn't matter. It didn't change our fortunes one bit that we got that cornerback.
No.
Because we didn't have a quarterback. We didn't have a coordinator. We didn't have a core. We didn't have any skill players that mattered. We didn't have an offensive line. Nothing worked. None of the things that it takes to make a winning football franchise. And so in that way, I struggle. And I struggle even more knowing that round 1 has now been inflated to its own night. That's 3.5 to 4 hours long.
Because all the trades. Remember, as soon as trade happens, clock resets.
And also, the Bills just happened to get good at the same time the NFL got greedy. So as they've juiced the format to make this thing more profitable,
sure,
it coincides with the fact that we're constantly drafting in the 20s.
Which is great. I want to be drafting at 32.
I know, but it makes the thing like it's like a cheese grater to my nerves.
See, and I love it. I love it. I'd love to see how franchises value different players in different positions, even after all of the research and everything right in front of your face. That just goes to show we're two average guys, right?
Yep.
Hey, Chris, you're an average guy, right?
With great hair.
With great hair. Not Hitler Youth hair like Drew just said, but you have great hair. Great features, my man. But if we can recognize that if you got that QB dog and you got that guy, I don't care where you draft. Everything should be focused on offense. Specifically, even if you have that quarterback.
Or at least your best, because you still have to stock the cupboard.
You have to, but your high-end assets, if you are not doing your high-end assets, your high-end free agent assets on offense, you're wrong. I'm sorry.
Or
you're
a defensive line, and here's the only thing I'll say. Pass rushers, pass protectors, some of the highest paid players in the game.
Sure, other than quarterback.
If you're not using your scratch-off tickets that every NFL pick is, if you're not using it to land there at the top of a draft, then almost like you better be if you're taking luxury picks like running backs. Remember when the Giants drafted Saquon Barkley? That's a luxury pick.
And you didn't have a quarterback.
You put the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse, and that's the end. Right. That pick will go down as a disastrous pick for their franchise because.
And he's a great player.
Even though Sam Darnold wasn't, you drafted a good player, but it doesn't matter because your team was so bad that his impact couldn't raise all boats.
Right.
That's it. You weren't the tide. You were just a bit piece.
And it's
you
funny.
were just another boat on the water.
And it's funny. I'm glad you said that position because you could think of, say, Barry Sanders. Disgusting, right? Gross. He still had Scott Mitchell. He still had Herman Moore. They still had the quarterback to go along with it. You know what I mean?
I mean, did they? And he only had one play.
If you don't have, but that's the only time that Detroit was relevant. I'm just saying. But if
guys,
you don't have that
about
piece,
Doug, he's a Michigan guy. You can tell by his hat. You could
go blue.
He's a Michigan and Detroit Lions guy.
Listen, we're gonna break the Bama record this year. A Michigan dude's drafted this year in the draft. We're gonna break the Alabama record.
Okay.
You watch.
Roll Tide.
You watch. No, ew.
So this is what I want to talk about as we talk about the ending of the pre-draft season, which can't come fast enough, right? I just feel like all of this stuff and watching years of people tell me that picks are important, tell me this player is going to be a cornerstone, this guy has the potential to change, and nothing actually changes, right? Like you shuffle deck chairs, and at the end of the day, even after the draft, even after the post-draft free agency, and everyone hits the regular season, and they go, well, this team drafted so well. They're obviously a shoe-in to improve. And then they don't. And at the end of the year, it's still the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs playing in the divisional round. And everyone has to, it's that astronaut meme. The guy has a gun to the back of his head, and he goes, wait a minute. So the teams with the quarterbacks just end up winning all the time? He goes, always has been.
Oh, it's funny because if you're a person who's listening to this and watching this show right now, and you're really just starting to get into the NFL draft, and you're seeing all these different draft experts, you know, whether they're on ESPN, CBS Sports, whatever they're on, and this is what you need, this is what they think, this is what you need to become a good franchise. And it just happened that they're the second favorite team of mine because of my family being from Michigan. The Lions, last year, you were with me, last year, when they went off the cuff, and myself included.
They took Jahmyr Gibbs, and you should have seen his face.
Myself included, like Drew goes, I remember it was 20 seconds before the pick. Drew looks at me, and he goes, Doug, what are they doing? I go, I don't know. They'll mess this up. They'll draft Gibbs or something early. And then they draft him, and I'm not an expert, but then you have the experts go, this was terrible. What are you doing? Every single pick they did that with ended up working out. And the majority of those picks from your Branch in the back, from your Laporta, your Gibbs, and your Jack Campbell, who came on the second half of the season, who's a linebacker from Iowa. All those were four important pieces that led them to go to an NFC championship game.
And everyone hated him.
And everyone, after that, they got terrible grades.
Hey, I hated Josh Allen. We got paid for doing it.
We got terrible. When they, like, oh, my God. You imagine if it was Rosen? Oh, my God.
We'd be doing this thing again where we're having a draft show and only covering the top 10 picks.
Right.
Guys, half the reason we're testing the live feature tonight and just testing it out is because on Friday night, we are going to be playing host to the Hashtag Sports Crew. And we're going to be going live, Chris, I'm assuming from the Hashtag Sports channel?
Yes.
For rounds 2 and 3.
Using our studio and our equipment, and I'm going to be here simply just to add color commentary, so you know how that goes, for rounds 2 and 3 on Friday night. But we figured, why not give the equipment a whirl? Let's take this baby out and see what she can do. Hopefully it doesn't challenge her on us.
Sure.
Why don't we go to resident nerd and Eclipse expert Michael Partham.
What do we got?
Pass rushers are a bad high pick investment, especially if your team rotates them.
Yes.
Focus defensive picks on secondary. Bruce Nolan knows.
Yeah, and these are the types of things that I love about this is what I love about being able to do this more over the course of the year and over the summer. We're going to be doing more of these live things.
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that other people can add their commentary and we can talk about it.
Right.
I would agree. I mean, it depends on where you're drafting. Here's the thing. They've statistically proven that pass rush success drops off the farther down in a round you go. Now, this isn't just over the course of a season. This is over the course of your rookie contract. Pass rushers taken in the top 10 picks are historically more disruptive when you talk about quarterback hits, hurries, sacks, all of the statistics that matter to a pass rusher. Outside of the top 10, there's like a plateau, and then you go down a level. Now, if you go from 10 to 25, there's another level. At the end of the first round to the middle of the second round, there's another plateau, and it just keeps on going down to where, like, once you get into the second round, think about the AJ Epenesas of the world. Guys who maybe come on slowly into the NFL.
3 years to figure it out.
But at the same time, even his high watermark is only 6.5 sacks.
Right. And it's not even double-digit sacks.
So everyone who wants to point to Yannick Ngakoue as well, you can find a guy in the 5th round. He is the outlier, not the rule.
Right.
And that's where fans get all twisted up in their emotions. The same concept goes for Jordan Poyer and for Micah Hyde.
Sure.
People point to that and go, well, I can just wait for a safety. Well, we spent a half hour talking to Bruce Nolan about all the reasons that that's a terrible idea.
Right.
And we actually have a chart not proving, but kind of illustrating, like, the sweet spot seems to be round 2 and 3 for safeties because you're getting a high-level athlete still. But now you're not getting the guy who's jumping out of the gym. You're getting a dude whose processing on tape fits your scheme.
Well, that's the thing. There's different types of this. There's 3 positions in this draft that are extremely deep. It's wide receiver, it's safety, and it's defensive tackle.
And
Those 3 positions.
These 3 things.
And we need all 3, but it's funny that you said pass rush. The way that the game has changed, there aren't.
You need A gap and B gap pressure.
There aren't your Reggie Whites and your Bruce Smiths.
No.
They're just not. You know what I mean? They're just not.
Chris Jones might be the last great. But like when you talk about great pass rushers, Von Miller was in his prime.
Because he had that wicked dip before those ACL tears.
Who else, Chris? Who's the last guy to get sacks that you can think of off the top of your head as a Lay fan? Who you go?
Jared Allen.
There
you go. There you go. Look at you.
That dude ruled.
That's absolutely outstanding. I think that's a prime example. But it's changed to where that if you're Buffalo.
We're going to do it in the aggregate.
If you're Buffalo and you're seeing here and you're looking at how your roster has been built so far.
Yep.
So we'll say the majority of the free agent money has gone to veteran defensive tackles. It has. They're bringing in 30-year-old and 31-year-old guys who know each other, you know what I mean, who know Daquan Jones, who know Ed Oliver. And again, they rotate. Sean rotates that defensive line, okay? So to add a high-end investment into that,
it seems
like a very bad idea, and I think they understand that. That's why, like, when I'm looking at some of these people about where we're picking and everything like that, and you see a Johnny Newton, the D tackle, you know what I mean, come down and be like, oh, they're afraid to take him. I don't think that they're going to allocate an asset of a first-round pick that high there. I just don't think they're going to do it.
And so it's kind of with that we want to launch into the actual superlatives and the talk about this draft class, specifically as it points to the Buffalo Bills. Guys, let's all crack a drink here. You got one, Chris?
No, I'm not cracking a drink.
Oh, come on.
You got to work?
No.
No, he's quarterbacking a live stream and he's nervous. He can taste it. He's
Listen,
got the taste of pennies in his mouth
Did
right
you
now.
just switch your hair? Did you just get rid of the Come on, man. It was cocked to the side.
It's all cocked to the side.
Guys, Chris has the taste of pennies in his mouth right now because he's like an astronaut. He just blasted off and he's trying something for the first time. He wants to be spot on with this.
My ex-girlfriend was under my phone. Her name was Pennies. You can imagine why. That's why I put her in there for.
I just opened a beer. I've been saving it. Well, it's an IPA that was sent to me by Eric Harris, and I'm gonna make fun of him in a little bit. So, Eric, I love you, but I figured I would save this beer for tonight where I can talk about it. Let's talk about pre-draft superlatives. The most interesting pre-draft threads and moments. I've got a couple. How about, you're talking about defensive line?
Mm-hmm.
This is a nice jumping off point. Tavondre Sweat's DUI and the impact on his draft stock and what it's going to tell us about where franchises are. I have a theory. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Tavondre Sweat was arrested under suspicion of DWI after a car accident in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And his blood alcohol content at the scene was double the legal limit. Now he's a big hoss, but double the legal limit.
For you who do not know, he is a top defensive tackle prospect in the upcoming draft out of Texas.
Now, what's hilarious to me is they listed in the police report that the other driver, like, he was driving an SUV, he crashed into a sedan. We don't know who's at fault, we don't know a lot of the details, but we do know that the other driver fled the scene on foot. And everyone goes, well, that's weird, why would the other guy run? Doug, if you Chris, if you were to crash into a vehicle and you got out all full of piss and vinegar, who the heck? And then a mountain of a human being were to climb out of the other SUV, wouldn't you run?
Chris, do you know who he is? Pull him up. Pull his picture
Just
up.
Google Tavondre Sweat.
This dude's a mammoth.
I'll tell you, if I got in a wreck like that, and this Sweat guy, cool, what is he, 6'2", 350, cool, gets out of the vehicle and starts walking towards me, I turn around the other way and I walk away like Rashid Rice.
and just I like it. And just so you know, he's 6'4", over 360.
Chris, he's
for that dude to be over the double.
How big was Ted Washington? Look that up for me.
Look up Ted Washington, because Sweat is he's 6'4", 3. He's listed at the combine
375.
Okay, all right. This dude is listed at 6'4", 366.
So you're talking about a modern day Ted Washington in the NFL.
Sure.
And he comes walking towards you in the middle of the night when you crash into his car.
Give me him.
Yeah, you're gonna run. You're gonna run into the darkness and just hide. Like, I'm gonna go hide in the woods. Like, I'm not coming out.
Folks, do I look like I run? I don't run. I see that dude, and he's a little cocked. I'm running. I am Forrest Gump. I'm running, and you won't believe how fast I run. I'm running.
So when you think about what things like this have done to the stock of NFL players, Laramie Tunsil's photo dropped on draft night, obviously planned, and it dropped his draft stock, and it's why the Dolphins were able to draft him where they were. And so everybody's kind of cobbled together this idea that, well, teams really care, though, about these character things. And then Jalen Carter last year, who, like Jalen Carter had some problems. Street racing issues with reckless behavior. There was a lot of stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't hurt his draft stock at all. He was
still went in the first round of the Eagles.
Number 9 in the top 10, behind only 2 defensive players. Right. Defensive Rookie of the Year, Will Anderson, and Tyree Wilson, which is hilarious that they took Tyree Wilson ahead of him, because isn't that the most... First of all, wouldn't he seem like the most Raiders pick? Mm-hmm. And then also, that's the most Raiders thing to do, is miss on that pick. Also, I just look at this and I say, okay, so certain teams have decided they care more about how you execute on the field than who you are as a human being. The Bills have set themselves apart from that. They have made it clear they believe they need both. They need character.
They when they're ranking their people, and I'm
character
assuming,
plays a role.
Oh my God, it's huge with them. That's why I think they interview people multiple times. You know what I mean? I think they just want to, and it's just not talking to them.
Well, because Chris, I can come to you one time and have a meeting with you, and I can bullshit you. How many times can you bullshit me, though? Can I get away with it once, twice?
Right.
For 9 years, yes.
Right. Like there's been reports that the Bills have interviewed Ladd McConkey and Graham Barton multiple times. Like multiple times. Not just at the combine, but also private workouts, things like that. And when they're showing that much interest into someone, and I just trying to think that they're checking all the boxes, and character is obviously what you do on the field. This is a business. This is sports. Obviously, you need the production.
But
you know what I mean? But they don't want, and I'm not going to say he was bad for us. They don't want the Marcel Darius's signing the $66 million contract and then go getting a barrel full of weed when it's illegal and giving it to your boys down south. You know what I mean? That's what they don't want.
But I think what was always missed about Marcel Darius, and that was one of my...
He had the weapon on. He had the weapon on him too, right?
No, I don't think he did.
That was Adolphus Washington.
Thank you. Sorry, number 92.
He had a gun at a water park. Adolphus Washington had a gun at a water park.
Who had the weapon when they got pulled over?
I don't. Oh, that was.
That was Darius.
No, that was the tackle that we took next to Reggie Ragland. The offensive tackle we took from Alabama.
Okay.
So
Cyrus Kouandjio.
That's it.
Marcel Darius's bag was that nobody had done their homework on him pre-draft in terms of what his aspirations were, or at least when he talked, they weren't listening.
Now hold on, stop right there.
No.
You didn't do your homework. That's how bad the regime was. Third overall pick. You don't do your homework.
But he told every team and it came out afterwards. They were like, in retrospect, we should have listened when he talked. You know, when someone says the quiet part out loud, you should listen. When a guy comes to you and says, when you ask him, like, what's your dream? Like, what's your mission here as an NFL football player? His answer was never, I want to be a Super Bowl champion. His answer was never, I want to be the greatest to ever play my position. It was always, I come from a broken family, and I want to play so well that they have to pay me the money I need to get my family together. And the second he signed that contract, he used that money to build a giant house, go out and find all of his foster brothers and sisters and get them all together, and they live together in a house to this day down south in Alabama. Yeah. And that's the thing that I think you miss as a GM if all you're looking at is the box statistics.
Creek Degenerate also wants us to know that Cyrus Kouandjio also ran down the 400.
I was going to say, didn't he have a freak out and didn't he try to hop a fence and he ended up naked?
He was smoking synthetic marijuana allegedly.
I believe they call that K2 on the streets.
So the idea is Tavondre Sweat was supposed to be a day 2 pick. What happens to him now?
Now he falls in the Bills' lap.
But that's the question. Does the NFL actually care about this character stuff? Or are people willing to say, well, we care? Because you hear the pundits on the radio bloviate about, I'm going to do my Bill Burr impression of the media, but it's reprehensible. Well, you can't trust this guy with a contract. And then they go, well, I mean, if Ted Washington 2.0 is there in the second round and he's there, we should take it.
Right. Well, you answered your own question earlier, though. The Eagles now you would say the Eagles are not a poor run organization, right?
No.
Okay. They just spent a top 10 pick on this dude.
And so with that...
And there was a death involved. This ain't no misdemeanor.
It'll be an interesting test of what a lot of teams think about character, the Bills included.
Well, think about, like, the history of that character in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of, like, Pac-Man Jones.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to Tennessee with Jeff Fisher.
Right.
Doesn't work.
Right.
Lawrence Phillips. He goes to Dick Vermeil in St.
Rams.
Louis.
Yeah,
and he ends up he's dead now, but he ended up going to jail for killing someone.
Yeah.
There's so many teams in the NFL that when they see that, they're like, we have the support structure that we can
make this
put
work.
around this guy.
I will say this. There is one thing, even in 2024, there is one thing that in every single professional sport, specifically the NFL, that there's two now. One's gambling, but that they don't play with. One is gambling, and the most important thing is the domestic violence.
Oh, yeah.
If if that is part of your resume, they will not touch you with a 10-foot pole.
Unless you're Tyreek Hill.
Because you know why?
Unless you're Tyreek Hill and you're the Kansas City Chiefs, who have proven they don't care about character.
Because
in which case
it's bad for business. Yeah, but what did they do with him?
And now
they traded him.
And now they're in here having to look for a replacement for Rashee Rice because they don't care about character. And this is the problem with. Think about it. How many players got away with stuff back in the days when there wasn't cameras and dash cams and people filming things everywhere? I bet you a lot of players, I know firsthand, a lot of players, some of them on the Buffalo Bills, got away with a lot of scandalous stuff because there was no way to really make it stick. Right. But now technology's rendered a lot of that useless.
If
And
you're
so
a pro athlete, you are on camera and audio 24/7.
act like you're under observation all
Always
the time.
365. Absolutely.
Now, another hilarious, before we get into kind of some Bills, really kind of our thoughts of the night and the crux of this thing. I do think that one of the most hilarious storylines to come out of this pre-draft process is whatever the hell the Commanders did with their quarterback interviews. Hey, Chris, I've got an idea. I'm an outside-the-box thinker, okay? I've got a cool idea for you. We're going to bring in every single quarterback prospect in the draft. We're just going to do it at the same time, and we're going to make them all go to Topgolf together. And we're going to see who asserts their dominance. And that's how we're going to do this interview. What the hell are we talking about?
Right.
I know that, okay, first of all, I know Dan Snyder was the worst thing to ever, one of the worst things to ever happen to football. But, oh my God, their new owner might be dumber than him. Imagine you greenlighted that as an owner, saying, hey, we're going to find our next franchise quarterback in this draft. You know how? We're going to put them all in a bucket like crayfish and just tap the sides and see what happens. They're kids. These aren't even, when people are like, oh, they're grown men.
No, they're not.
They are kids.
No, they're not.
They are early 20s. Chris, if you had put me and Doug in the same room and thrown enough barbs, I remember fighting you out in front of 811 Tift Street.
Sure.
At least 2 or 3 times. And the hilarious part is I'm bombed. He's sort of buzzed.
Yeah.
And he just laughed the entire time and let me punch myself out.
Right. I like when my favorite part of that is when you thought you had me.
Oh, I got him in a headlock, Chris, and he was bent over. And I go, are you done? I had him in a standing guillotine. I was like, there's no way he's getting out of here.
You thought he had me.
And he literally took the cigarette out of his mouth and handed it to our friend and then just stood up. And all of a sudden, I'm looking down at the ground. It's like, oh, this is a bad idea. This is a terrible
I
idea.
threw Drew off me. He gets up and he goes, you good? That's what he said to me. He goes, you good? I go, Matt, our best friend, Matt, he looks at me, he goes, Drew, I don't think that's the question you should be asking him. Like, I don't think that's what you're supposed to say.
Guys, I don't know if you know that. I don't know if you're seeing a pattern. I've always been a horse's ass. It's not just on this podcast.
Reminds me when Drew told me to get out of the truck.
Dude,
remember that?
When we left the Giants game.
Yeah.
When we left that, and I haven't seen you that mad. You know what? You know what it is?
For those of you who don't know, I tried to throw Chris out of a moving vehicle while we were coming home from the Giants game at halftime.
But you know what it is? It's not Chris. It's not me. It's not the Giants. It's not the Bills. It's Brian Daboll. Brian, anything related with Brian Daboll makes you go to a different place.
So the fair now. Whatever the Commanders did with this quarterback interview, I pity whoever they draft because it's going to be a problem. They've already established that we don't know how to manage this.
How do you get off to a wrong start
How do you
with a guy like Jaden Daniels?
How do you
irritate
irritate every quarterback prospect at one time? Here's the blueprint.
It's insane.
Here's how you alienate every single quarterback prospect in this draft in one fell swoop. Even if you draft them, they're not going to trust you. Because they're going to be like, these guys, they're idiots.
I was watching NFL Live today, and they started off by one of the things, they're like, where does Washington go with the second pick? They already got off to a shaky start with Jaden Daniels. What do you mean already got off? All you did was interview. How are you interviewing that bad? And like you said, these aren't grown men. These are still kids. This dude just won the Heisman, and you're off to a rocky start? You don't have a quarterback.
If I was going into a job interview and you told me, hey, Drew, show up, have a PowerPoint presentation ready, come to, I've had this interview before. It's the job I currently hold. They go, hey, have a PowerPoint ready, be prepared to present 5 to 7 slides and be able to talk about yourself to a group of individuals who are potentially going to be working with you.
Right.
Okay, done. I can prep. And then you show up and there's 8 other dudes in the room at the same time and they go, okay, all of your PowerPoints are going to go on at the same time. Fight.
Right. It's like the Key and Peele episode when they're interviewing. It's in the 70s, and they put you specifically right outside the door, paper thin walls, everything and you hear the whole thing. That's just a bad strategy.
Whatever's happening in Washington, it won't go well. Whoever they draft, Chris. Do we want to make a secret about this? Whatever quarterback they draft, it will not go well.
Well, you know that Caleb Williams is going to be a bust.
You can say that.
That is 100%.
I don't care about that. In fact, I saw a hilarious tweet today where someone was like, one NFL executive said it would be like having Prince inside your locker room. And I was like, for Chicago, I saw the tweet. The tweet was essentially, hey, Chicago, you're about to have the best Super Bowl halftime ever.
Listen, man.
Purple Rain, that's the best rendition. It's never been done better.
It's been fantastic. And, like, if it's sad, too, because if you think about it, if you think of Washington right now, obviously they don't have that quarterback, and we just harped on. You need that guy. If you're gonna compete for that Super Bowl, you gotta
take a step.
You need that guy.
Get the quarterback and figure the rest out later. The problem is don't end up with a Trevor Lawrence, who you find out later needs a boatload of help.
Well,
don't end up with a Zach Wilson who is a never was, right? Not even a has been, a never was. You can't afford to whiff, or you will be back here again.
And I'm glad you brought him up, too, because I just want people to understand when we're talking the elite quarterbacks of what you need to go to a Super Bowl, I'm not talking about your Trevor Lawrence and your Herbert. That's not what I'm talking about. Because those guys have shown, even with talent in front of them, like if you're Herbert, you have Keenan Allen, you have Mike Williams, you have the NFL leading touchdown scorer in your backfield in Eckler, and you still can't get it done, all right? I'm not talking about that. That's why drafting these quarterbacks to try and get your Mahomes, to try and find your Josh Allen, to try and find your Joe Burrow. You know what I mean? Like, you need that. That's why quarterback is the most important position to draft in the NFL.
And in fact, he just spent when we were off air telling me about all the ways the Chargers should probably trade Herbert to someone like the Vikings and probably try to pick another quarterback because they're going to rebuild anyway.
Right.
Now, as we pivot to the Buffalo Bills, because we don't that's the farthest thing from our need, and that puts us, to your point, in a position of advantage. Some of the most exhausting things I've heard about this draft, I think it comes from our own community. The Bills wide receiver talk has sucked the life out of me. Like the term succubus. Chris, can you give that a Google? I want to know the technical definition of the term succubus because that's what the wide receiver train has been to me. Last week's diatribe on our podcast by Nate Geary, aimed at his radio partner and friend Jeremy White, was spot on. The wide receiver train doesn't have a conductor. Everyone on it has been snorting Colombian rowdy powder, and it's racing down the tracks at a speed that can't possibly be safe. The term succubus, a demon or supernatural entity in folklore in female form that appears in dreams to seduce men usually, So the idea is it sucks the soul out of everybody. And that's what you've done to me, wide receiver train. I want you to hear me, and I want you to see me. You done it. You killed me inside. Because this is what I figured out, especially after listening to Nate last week. No matter what happens, none of you will be happy. Even if and when the Bills do make a move at wide receiver, none of you will be happy. Okay? Let me run it down for you. If we don't trade up for someone like a Duns or a Dunze, whatever the
Roma Dunze.
Who cares? It doesn't matter. He's not wearing a Bills uniform. A Dunze, Neighbors. Critics will say we are being too conservative if you don't pull the trigger on a move like that. If we trade up just a little to try to get a guy like BTJ, if you feel like you have to go up and get Worthy or A.D. Mitchell, and you go, well, he's not going to be here at 28, so we should give up some assets, but not a ton. Then they're going to say that Bean is cheap and can't negotiate a trade.
You're never, ever, specifically sports fans, you're never, ever going to be able to please everyone in the room. You're never.
But the problem is the audience became huge. Of all the people who want to see one thing get done, and it's not going to happen the way the majority of you want it.
Right.
If you think that we should stand pat and we should do nothing and let the board come to us, and then we draft a Lad McConkey, there's going to be people calling WGR 550 and screaming about how we already have a bunch of guys with that skill set. We don't understand why this is necessary. And we have a bunch of maybe good wide receiver talents. Why did we sit on our hands? Here's a better one. If you draft a Xavier Legette, you have all the mock draft people who are going to scream about how, well, that's too early. That's a reach. You have no fucking idea what other GMs are thinking, but you're going to say it.
Right.
You're going to feel it, and you're going to think it, because mock draft culture has taught you that this is how a draft should go. And so you should be able to trade this, and you should be able to get here, and this player should go there, because that's where it happens in every mock draft. How many times, Chris, are mock drafters wrong?
I think there's a model, and I think there's a team that I would love to see the Bills over this draft and next draft. I would love to see the Bills take after, and that's Green Bay. Green Bay in the last 2 years have drafted 4 wide receivers and 3 tight ends in the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft.
Okay, that's pretty good.
I think, specifically with Kansas City showing us that you do not need a bona fide number 1 receiver.
If your coordinator is good enough.
And your quarterback. And we have one of those guys. We do. We have one of those guys. I don't think you need a bona fide number 1 receiver to win a Super Bowl. If you have your Burrow, your Allen, even though Burrow's got one, your Burrow, your Allen, your Mahomes, you don't need one. So I like the Green Bay model of it just because I think you should throw as many darts at the board as you can. Because, again, I'm just going to bring them up for this scenario. Watson from Green Bay. I think even Jalen Reed, all of them, Romeo Dobbs, I think Watson's the best one. But you know why it was smart what they did? Watson can't stay on the field because of his hamstring. When he's healthy, he's absolutely fine. You can't count on that when you draft a guy. You know what I mean? So why not take as many darts you can, throw them at the board, and just try and get lucky? You have 4 receivers right now. I'm not talking about KJ Hamler or stuff like that. You have 4 receivers right now, and you have 10 picks, I believe. Go draft 3 guys. I don't care where you draft them. One of them better be early. But go draft 3. You want to draft one in the first, the third, and the 5th? Fine.
And what's going to happen to you emotionally if draft day rolls around and they announce the Buffalo Bills have just traded a first-round pick? We're not even on the clock. And they announce the Buffalo Bills have just traded away a first-round pick, next year's second, and all this bullshit. And we're going to get a Brandon Ayuk, or hey, the Bills made a trade for Cortland Sutton. And you go, all right, well, then this just kind of skews everything, doesn't it? And all of the time and energy that you as a fan poured into this, pining for a wide receiver, fighting with people online about it, watching podcasts devoted to dissecting the wide receivers, it all seems like wasted time, doesn't it? Was it Wasted Time by Skid Row?
Sure, but if they did that, like, let's say it was, I don't think it's going to, San Francisco right now, I mean, the GM Lynch has already come out and said that he wants Ayuk to be a 49er for life. He wants him to retire that.
Yeah.
But then the other side is, if they do want to move him, they're looking for a first-round pick. So the only problem is this. The problem also that you have to consider is money. Okay?
Yeah, no kidding, Doug.
It's money.
I like that you said that like it was a shock to people.
Well, here's the thing, though. I don't want to I would rather take someone at 28 on that rookie deal than give up my 28th overall pick for someone like Ayuk. Now, if you told me I had to give up my first year this year, my first year next year, and maybe a second, and I got Justin Jefferson, that's different. That's different. He's in his 5th-year option. I can backload his new contract. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The Diggs money is completely off next year. I can do that. So the situation is all different.
Now, I just want to run this back for anybody who hasn't watched our podcast from last week with Nate Geary. I just want to run this down for you as you're talking about this before we move on.
Mm-hmm.
If you had done what I was suggesting somebody do and just stay pat at 28 and see how the board falls.
Sure.
Let's say wide receiver still is where you want the organization to go. If you stayed over the last 2 seasons, or 3 seasons, 4 seasons, 5 seasons, and you looked at what teams in our approximate range could have accomplished if they had just gone wide receiver in the first round, any other player in the second round, wide receiver in the third round, the tandems that you could create would be talked about. Like, if the Bills were to have pulled that off, they would have been talked about in the same concept right now as the way that people talked about the Bengals when they had Boyd, Chase, and Higgins.
Sure.
Okay? 2023 last year would have been Jordan Addison and Tank Dell. Now, if you had added them at our current picks, like, if you had added both of them to this team, you'd be like, oh, our wide receiver core is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
2022, Christian Watson,
mm-hmm.
George Pickens. our wide receiver core stocked. 2021, Rashad Bateman and Nico Collins.
Give me him.
Could have had both of them. 2020, Brandon Ayuk or Michael Pittman and Gabe Davis.
Mm-hmm.
No one would have cried about it.
Right.
No one would have been mad.
So do you see when you keep reading that, do you see what I mean about throwing the darts at the board?
And this is why I think that everybody who's talking about a big move, a giant swing,
No.
you don't do it.
No.
You don't do it.
I don't care if Malik Neighbors goes before Marvin Harrison Jr. and Marvin Harrison Jr. falls to the Giants
But they're
at
all
6.
going to be mad regardless of what happens.
Don't do it.
We're never going to appease anybody. And that's why all of this talk is chaos to me, and I hate it. Now,
see, I love
speaking of
it.
chaos and things I hate and things that you love,
Our latest comment.
What's that?
Well, you said chaos, so I figured we'd let everyone know that Alf Artiaga, which is us, Merry Draftmas Eve.
I love it.
Guys,
I love it.
I love Elf. Elf over there at 3 yards per carry. We're going to be having him on next week for a post-draft AFC East roundup. It's going to be a lot of fun, getting to pick everybody's brain about how they think their draft went.
Mm-hmm.
Doug, you've been doing mock drafts since week 2, and it infuriates me. Like, when you talk to me about it, Chris, when Doug comes to me and goes, so I did this mock draft, and here's what I saw, I want to bite his phone in half.
No.
Like, I want to sink my shark teeth into that phone and never let go.
No. Listen, been doing this, like he said, since week 2, but it's also because I love the college game as well, and I like to watch these different schools and all these different conferences play each other. It's insane. But for the Bills, so far, whether you go on Pro Football Focus, ESPN, any simulator you want to go to, any of the 3 main ones, the majority, 95%, has been an offensive player, specifically wide receiver or center for the Buffalo Bills at 28.
It's the best value.
It's the best value.
Not Cooper DeJean.
Not Cooper DeJean. I call him Cooper DeJean. You know, and that's my favorite prospect. Like, I tell people this. I like watching him. I loved Jalen Carter. You know what I mean? You imagine Jalen Carter in front of Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano? Like, they would just be like, they would just giggle. You know what I mean? They would just giggle. I love it. And again, he's my favorite prospect this year. If you draft him in the first round, you're wrong. I'm sorry, you're just wrong. If you look at how our roster is right now, you're wrong. The name of the game should be to get Josh as many weapons and as much protection as you can. He is the face of your franchise. He is the reason why you will win a Super Bowl. You need to keep him upright. You need to let him make plays. And you need to account for multiple things.
Now, here's a question I have for you, because I asked you to kind of take some notes on some of your results, and you kind of came in here a little prepared for this conversation. So when you're having these, you've been texting me about the results of your mock drafts, which I'm not going to lie, it does steal a piece of my soul every time I have to fucking read that.
You're welcome.
But, like, let's talk about this. So taking a non-wide receiver in the first round, what does that do to the wide receivers that you end up with afterwards?
So
do you still end up with a group that seems acceptable?
If you take, let's just say,
because they still do have to flesh that room out with talent.
So let's just say the Bills stay pat at 28. Let's say they don't trade up for Brian Thomas Jr. They don't make a ridiculous trade like a Julio Jones type and move up to the top 10. Let's say they stay pat and they take defensive tackle Johnny Newton, or they take a Cooper DeJean, or Wiggins falls, the cornerback from Clemson who just ran a 4.28. You know how Bean loves those people. Let's just say they go off the cuff and they take the defensive player. When you're looking at second round at 60.
I like that you blamed it on Bean. Yeah, that's a Bean pick.
No. That's a McDermott pick. I'm sorry. I apologize. I did not mean to say Bean. It's a McDermott pick. But if you stay at 60 there, then that's when you're getting into your Ricky Pearsall's, your Javon Baker, your Roman Wilson most of the time is still there.
But
you know what I mean?
That.
Malachi Corley is still there out of Western Kentucky, who's a yak guy. You know, when instead of doing that and instead of going that route, if you take yourself at 28, you stand pat, and you take A.D. Mitchell, you take Worthy, who both of those guys are available in 95% of the mocks that I do on all three of the websites that I go through. They're still there at 28. You're not giving up assets. Brian Thomas Jr., I think, is a guy who they would absolutely like. That dude only falls to 28, like the opposite, 5% of the time. I don't think he makes it past 18 at Cincinnati. I think he can go to 15 at the Colts. But if you did that, if you take that defensive player, your options are significantly less staying at 60.
Okay.
You're going to have to make a trade up like 20 spots, like to get to 40.
And so this leads us into a conversation about ideas. And Chris, we're going to go around the room, ideas we love and hate ahead of the draft. And then we're going to get the hell out of here and stop bothering all these people, or at least bothering our listeners who are listening to this in podcast form, because they go, guys, you haven't talked about Bill's ideas in a while. Here's one for you. I love the idea. I heard it in a Brandon Beane press conference last week where he talked about how they don't necessarily need a wide receiver one. What they need everybody to do is play to their potential. So if you are a guy who's supposed to win with size, we need you to win with size. If you're a guy who wins with yards after the catch, we need you to be the guy who's winning with yards after the catch.
Mm-hmm.
We need you to do what your profile says you're capable of, because we drafted you with a thought in mind for how we're going to deploy you. That seems like a departure from the Stephon Diggs era of the Buffalo Bills offense here, with Josh Allen. Because the plan was get Stephon Diggs the ball 15 times a game.
And not drop it twice versus Kansas City in a divisional route game at home.
And then when you, but what you saw under Brady was this new approach of, hey, we're going to spread it out. We're going to involve the running back. We're going to get tertiary targets involved. We're going to spread the ball to make us harder to defend off the jump, because now defensive coordinators can't lock in on one part of our offense and make us one-dimensional. And the problem is, it almost fucking worked if the guy with the most talent on the field at the position made the one critical play you needed to.
Yep.
Stephon Diggs catches that ball, we win that football game, and nobody's sitting here talking about this.
He's still on the team.
We're probably winning a Super Bowl, and now we're all here. We're not talking about wide receivers.
No.
The difference is he didn't make that catch. Mm-hmm. And what it shows you is that, first of all, he's done the thing that he's done in every playoff game, because other teams bracket coverage, and you go, well, what do you want Diggs to do? Well, then you're not the guy. Then I can't have a guy who another team can take away and neuter my offense, even if it means that, like, the rest of what you saw under Brady. Diggs' production went down. Everybody else rose.
Well,
and the team started scoring points and winning football games.
It's also how Brady attacks it. He attacks the middle of the field.
And so the concept is, if this guy's too old, he doesn't have it, he can't get that jump ball anymore, he can't do this, he can't do that, then we need to move on. I don't care what it costs.
They clearly think that because we're eating $31 million in dead cap.
Hey,
so that's clearly their thought process.
I was yelling for more than $26 million, and when I saw that, I was like, here we go. Yeah, we did the thing.
That's clearly their thought process.
What I'll say is, if you believe that you're a football team that can make it up in the aggregate, you need as many targets as possible. And this is why one of the ideas, we're going to go around talking about ideas we love and hate. One of the ideas I love is either staying pat, or maybe even if there's a team that sees like Michael Penix Jr.'s falling and there is a team in the second round that wants that. If you can trade down into the early second.
Sure.
You've heard Beane talk about it. Again, same press conference where he was talking about what his proclivities were last week. He mentioned that last year he had an opportunity to trade out of the first completely. And he's like, I really liked it. It was an attractive thing, but Dalton was there and we really liked him, so I had to go up and get him. But he would have loved to trade out of the first round.
Sure.
At the back half of the first.
But you see what he did, though? He didn't trade up 15 spots.
No, we traded up 3.
Right.
Just to get ahead of and what
to get ahead of Dallas.
And here's the worst part. What did Dallas do in the second round? They drafted a tight end.
Right.
And so you knew they were going to take.
Was it Ferguson?
Yeah, they were going to take Kincaid if they could.
Oh, yeah.
So the idea is, I think you're looking at a GM who's probably going to parlay a pick either staying pat or going backwards. And I love the idea of getting 2 wide receivers, one in the first, one in the third. And you just see where that lands you. Because I guarantee you, whatever we're adding now, this is something that's been talked about. The guys over at the Air Raid Hour, even though we poke jokes and make fun, or at least I do, Steve did the work and kind of showed like, hey, even for people talking about a historically deep class, it's because it's top heavy. Once you get outside the first 2 rounds, it's not like there's any extra depth down the draft.
No.
So why not double dip if you really think that's a problem spot?
It's not.
You could put together a dynamic tandem and have at least 2 more chances to hit on a guy who might be the guy. You know, if Xavier Leggett's been talked about as kind of a, like they've talked about him as a Eric Moulds type. He can't do a lot about route running and these other things, but if you get him the ball, he's electric. Okay. I can work with that with a quarterback like Josh.
Right. Well, that's the thing too. We have the guy.
We have the guy.
We have the guy. The dude almost won a playoff game with Duke Williams as his receiver. Like
me drunk screaming at you in my basement about it.
Like, I mean, that's the only thing. Like, we have the guy. So instead of going out and getting that number 1 elite wide receiver, tell me this right now.
That's supposed to make the quarterback better. We don't need it. Now what we need is a whole bunch of guys. We talked about this. Joe Brady's system, it's more like basketball. I need a whole bunch of guys who can go out there and create separation so that my quarterback, and for people who go, no, that's not what it takes because we see the deep crosses and that's where. Do you remember that play in a Cowboys game on Thanksgiving where in the shadow of his own goalpost, Josh Allen stood there in the pocket and then found Cole Beasley for like 18 yards on 3rd and long in our own end zone for a first down and continue what was a touchdown drive?
Yeah.
Separate, he'll find you.
Sure.
Separate, he'll find you. He's going to put it on you. So you got to have good hands, and there's a certain archetype of wide receiver who can get there. But I'd rather have 2 who might be able to turn into ones than trade all the way up and give up all these other assets when our team has so many other needs.
My favorite scenario of this draft would be if the Bills, you'd have to give up 28. If the Bills could find a way to get Carolina's 2 second-round picks. They pick 33 and 39.
Okay.
If you can find a way
to get those.
To get that. Say I give up 20.
Oh, you'd crush this draft.
Say I give up 28, 60, and I have to give up my first 4th-round pick for it, and maybe a 6th-round pick next year.
And then we go into next year with double second-round picks and a first-round pick.
And remember, we're going to have 2 4th-round picks next year, 2 5th-round picks next year. Like we're gonna have all that.
You could stock the cupboard and have a Super Bowl worthy team.
That is my. If I could pick any perfect scenario for the Bills, obviously it's Brian Thomas Jr. falling to 28. But if that does not happen, my favorite scenario is trading with a team like Carolina, 33, 39, and double dipping at the wide receiver position.
Maybe Brian Thomas could borrow Laramie Tunsil's weed mask.
You know what? I think he needs to do something like that. We need him to get knocked down about 13 more spots because, like, I could see the Colts taking him at 15.
I don't want Buffalo taking a defensive player with the first 2 picks, maybe 3.
No,
because I'm sick of the draft philosophy, because we talked about it after we lost to the Chiefs.
Yep.
The draft philosophy's got to change. I'm sick of Bean and McDermott going, we got to beat Mahomes or we got to beat Joe Burrow.
We're going to do it with defense. You're not.
No
one is. No one is beating them with
give
defense.
Me some offense. Give me a lineman and a wide receiver, or lineman first, wide receiver second, wide receiver first, lineman second. Give me.
Listen,
let's
either
beat
way,
Mahomes at what he does, because we can do that. Give Josh Allen all of the resources that he needs.
That's the way to do it. That's the way you go at it. Fire with fire. Drew said it. You just said it. It's not the defensive route. You don't do that anymore.
We have a defensive coaching staff, and if you look at our draft history, Bernard, middle round pick,
Milano,
awesome,
middle round pick, Benford pick.
I was about to
Everybody.
say, if
Mid-round
you
pick.
look at our defense, we have mostly late round picks. I had this thought at the top of the show.
Sure.
When you were talking about where to invest capital, our defense right now is a lot of star players who mostly were mid to late round picks. And that's just what you have.
That's what you are. And you know what? Let's give him
Except
for all
for
of
the
his
line.
for all of
The
his
line is made of
for
early
all of
picks.
his downfalls. Let's give McDermott credit. He can coach the crap out of mediocre defensive
Which
players.
is why I don't care about where you draft a safety. I don't care
I'm
about
the
where
sa-
you
right.
go to find a cornerback depth piece
offense,
because
offense early, offense.
if you're going to really change, it's going to be offense early.
Sure.
Now, a couple more ideas, love and hate, just so we can get out of here with a laugh.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start with the first one. I hate the idea of J.J. McCarthy going, you Michigan boy. I hate the idea of J.J. McCarthy going in the first round to anyone but the Patriots.
I am a listen.
Please
Listen.
take him at number 3.
If you people don't know, huge. Look at the hat. Huge Michigan man. I have a picture framed right now of J.J. McCarthy on my wall holding that trophy. I just got it. It's
Yeah.
all hung up.
Please
That
put him
dude
in New
should.
England.
That dude should not. And again, he went 15-0. Dude can win. That dude should not be a first-round quarterback. Like, not only do I want New England to take him, I know. You know what? I don't want New England to take him because I don't want to root against him. I don't want Blake Corum, J.J. McCarthy, Chris Jenkins. I don't want Junior Colson. I don't want none of them going to any
Listen,
AFC
New
East
England's
people.
been taking Alabama players for years. I've had to live with it. Welcome to the club
No,
now.
I'm not doing that.
Oh, I hope they take all of them.
No. But again, all this, well, you just said J.J. McCarthy. You brought up Michael Penix Jr. You have not talked about Bo Nix, who
Oh, right.
only threw, I think, 4 or 5 interceptions all year. The best thing for teams like the Bills,
I saw
who
Bo
are
Nix in the
28,
SEC.
and the Chiefs, who had 32, the best thing for this is all of those quarterbacks having great years, all of those quarterbacks being healthy, all of those quarterbacks having huge pro days. And then I watch a quarterback at the combine named Sam Hartman out of Notre Dame who looks like a young David Hasselhoff and who's just got the flowing hair and the beard. And it's like, I might draft this guy in the 7th round just to boost my profile in the program on the roster. Like, I don't even need
We need
him.
a pretty guy.
He is the pretty guy.
The room needs a face. You guys are ugly as sin. This dude looks like football.
You know what he
Jesus.
looks like? If you look, Chris, pull him up. Pull him up. Sam Hartman, pull him up. You know what he looks like? He looks like he could be in Django Unchained and go. And he goes, "Yes, I'll have a slice of white cake." He doesn't say white cake like normal human beings. He goes the white cake.
Look at that. Look at that.
Look
Oh
at that.
my God,
look at
the
that.
fl-
Look
Hey.
at that flow.
Hey,
That dude could
the
be a
d-
hockey player.
The double R. Drew looks at home in that room. He definitely needs to be in a padded room.
Look at him. Look at that guy.
I love the commentary.
You know?
Now, I've got another idea. It's just a thought. I'm going to throw it out there for the wide receiver crowd. Xavier Worthy, you guys love him. I hate it. It's not so much durability as an issue because he was never hurt in college. But here's the rub. And I was talking to Doug about this before we started recording. He was 160 pounds at 6 feet tall at the combine. He's going to be. Now, the numbers show that most players bulk up, quote unquote, during their second year in the NFL.
Mhm.
Because if you talk to rookie prospects who struggle in their first year, they'll tell you flat out, I didn't have my normal offseason regimen. It was the draft process. It was interviews. It was figuring out where I'm going to go. Then it was getting a playbook. And then eventually somewhere in there in OTAs after you get drafted, you get your nutrition guide and your workout plan.
Sure.
But they don't even know you. They just made one up without seeing you. They don't know you and what works for you. So now you have to work with a franchise for an entire year so they can tailor your specific workout.
Mm-hmm. AJ Epinenza.
Well, so what happens is you end up really not being able to physically improve for the NFL game until your sophomore season. You know, the perfect example is Devin Achane for the Miami Dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
He showed up to OTAs bulked up. He looks like he's added muscle, but they're saying he's still just as fast as he was because he realized, oh, I'm too soft. I don't have the muscle mass so that when I hit a guy, I can't push him. He pushes me. I have to bulk up a little bit so I can still maintain speed but hit him and keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same concept. And I see a guy like Xavier Worthy who's made so many electric plays, but a lot of them come after contact because he's so fast. Well, in the
that's
NFL,
his MO.
in the NFL, you're going to have a hard time finding those angles because the defensive players
Oh, sure.
are going to take the best angles you've ever seen a defensive back take.
Sure.
And if you can't break loose from that, then all these highlight reel plays disappear.
But
So follow me here. You have one of two trains. Because if he stays at 160 for his rookie season, he'll be the lightest player in the NFL. The lightest player.
Yeah.
His upshot is Devonta Smith, or he could be Hollywood Brown, who's played for three different teams, and he's got injury concerns due to his size. Where do you want to invest your capital? I don't hate the idea of Xavier Worthy, but I caution the fact that if you can't get him up to speed physically for the NFL game, he could have a tough time.
All right, so let me ask you this. Let's say they go with my favorite idea. Let's say they somehow get 33 and 39 from Carolina.
Boom. Okay.
What happens if he's your second receiver you've taken at 39? You okay with it? I'm okay with it. I'm fine with it. Let's say you take A.D. Mitchell and him and you get that combo. Or let's say you take Troy Franklin or Xavier Legette, A.D. Mitchell. Like, I'm okay with that. Say you take Ladd McConkey and him. I'm fine with it.
All the people who keep talking about Tyreek Hill comps for Xavier Worthy, Tyreek Hill is 5'10", 185.
No,
he was a ball of muscle.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that. But what does give me hope is Devonta Smith, knock on wood, he stays pretty much healthy. Addison is a beanpole in Minnesota. He has stayed relatively healthy. You know what I mean? So that does give me concern because if you're the Bills and you draft him, what do you think Brady is going to be using him for?
Yeah.
Remember that go route? Remember that 9 route that Josh did when he hurt his elbow to Gabe Davis? All he did was this. Remember he threw it 3 times in a row versus Miami in the playoff game? Remember me and you were sitting there in the playoff game and we're like, when he threw it the second time, you looked right at me and you're like, he's not going to throw this 3 in a row. And he threw it the 3rd time in a row. Like, I'm not saying that, but I don't hate the idea if he's my second receiver taken. Now, if I'm at 20, if they stay at 28 and A.D. Mitchell's gone and Brian Thomas Jr. is gone, I am going to try and do my best to trade out of that pick.
Yep.
But if they show us that now, if those receivers,
Arteaga,
what did you say?
He's Jalen Waddle. He played at 172 last season. He trimmed to set the combine record and got down to 165.
Okay. I'm not gonna hate the idea.
Elf, you know.
I'm not gonna hate the idea.
This idea as much as I hate Elf's fucking goatee and the fact that I can't grow one.
Elf, listen, man. Listen, I know you're watching us right now. I pray that the Miami Dolphins do the wrong thing and take a wide receiver and not address the offensive line.
No, because make me happy.
Because I would absolutely love that. Because again, we're talking here saying offense, and Chris said it before me and Drew said it. If the Bills are sitting at 28 and the number 1 center is on the board, Powers Johnson out of Oregon, give me him all day. Give me him all day. I'm not gonna, as a Bills fan, you cannot be mad. You're putting a high-end quality asset into the protection of Josh Allen.
I will say this is one of the weird drafts where you think about when we took Greg Rousseau back in 2020?
No.
2021.
21.
When we took Greg Rousseau.
That was last year of Stephon Diggs' last playoff touchdown, 2021 versus the Ravens. Just letting you guys know that.
Oh, fuck. See, like that cuts deep.
For real.
So I'm not mad at it, but what I do is I point at it and I say, when you're drafting here, you're just going to get an army of Greg Rousseaus and AJ Epinezas. Is that how you want to spend your capital?
No.
Or do you want to go maybe get a player who can contribute to a thing that might win you a lot of football games?
Right.
Maybe contribute to the future of your football team. Okay, then let's go invest in the offensive line. Let's go invest in wide receivers. Now,
2 years ago, the Philadelphia Eagles had over 70 sacks and did not win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
They had over 70 sacks.
Yeah.
That should what?
Yeah, that should
And you gave up 38 and you gave up 38 points in a Super Bowl.
That's it. The year you made it.
I think Mario got in here. Take the center.
Jesus.
Take the center.
There you take the center.
Now, another idea I love, before we close this out, drafting a complimentary running back on day 3.
All day, but his specific skill set, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis out of South Dakota State, the specific skill set for that running back needs to be pass blocking.
But that's what I say. It's you're drafting Latavius Murray's replacement.
Because Cook doesn't do it.
But I don't want Cook doing that.
No.
The thing is, if Cook's on the field, I want a defensive coordinator to sweat and go, oh, shit, what are they going to do with him? I do not want this idea of, hey, well, don't worry, we're going to go out there and pass sets and we're going to roll out Latavius Murray because he's going to block most of the time, and if he catches it, his cap is 4 yards in a cloud of dust. No. Give me a big – look, you see these running backs in this class. None of them – there is no Saquon Barkley, but what there is a bunch of dudes who are big and they're physical and they're mean. Like Braylon Allen, he pass blocks like he wants it. Like he's looking to hit somebody.
This dude,
then the thing is, if you can put a ball in his hands and let him make a play. Now, you remember our conversation with Matt Waldman.
Said it was a good idea if Braylon Allen came here.
If Braylon Allen comes here, if we can find a way to trade back up into the 3rd, and this dude comes here, and the Bills draft, let's say they don't go wide receiver. Let's say they go wide receiver or center, wide receiver, and him. This guy, this is what you need as part of the whole team, and it's offensive oriented. It's offensive focused and offensive minded. Give me it.
If a run, you don't even have to trade. If the wide receiver run dictates that you don't get the guy who's there in the 3rd round, then a running back who can pass protect but is also a really physical runner who has speed,
right?
You can't go wrong. Of course, Mario is something
you
to
take
say.
a running back in the first 2 rounds, there will be a mutiny at City Hall.
Say it again.
Whoa. Hang on. Mario's lucky that there hasn't been a mutiny over the fact that they allow him to post on YouTube. I mean, the face, first of all,
we need to have a mutiny.
First of all, he ripped off John Wick's. First of all, Mario Granata from #Sports ripped off John Wick's look, right? He saw John Wick too many times, said, hey, I want that short shoulder crop look that I can put up in a man bun. Except he has none of the toughness.
It doesn't work with his hairline.
He has none of the toughness. In his forehead, we could put everything that's on this TV right now on his forehead.
You're telling me as a Bills fan. If the Bills' first 3 picks go like this, wide receiver, running back.
We said first 2. If it's first,
I don't want a running back in round 2.
You just said.
No, I said round 3.
Yeah,
I said round 3.
He's Buzz in Home Alone where he goes, listen, he goes 1, B, and D.
I said round no. He goes no. That's from The Sopranos when he goes 1 and then he goes B. No. 3rd round. 3rd round after. 3rd round's fine. 2nd round, no, absolutely not. 3rd round.
Mario wants Cole Bishop,
the safety out of Utah.
Mario also wants to get me.
Not early.
I'm going to give him early. Guys, so.
Get defense out of your head early, Mario.
Hey, so we've already worked all of these things out of our system. I think we have a good idea of how everybody here on the panel feels tonight. I feel good about this. I feel good about the fact that our first live stream didn't just explode on contact like the Challenger rocket.
I'm really mad though that someone from your high school didn't call you out. They're like, you still have stupid arms. You know what I mean? Something like that, like a mean, hurtful comment. Did someone say a mean, hurtful comment about Drew?
The guy who eats a bowl of rocks for breakfast is schooling me on looks. Okay, Drew.
Wait, did someone say that?
Yeah, it was Mario. Except we all know you eat bananas for breakfast, you fucking gorilla.
Yeah, man. Listen, hey, guys out there, if this is the first time you've seen Drew, stand up. Stand up. Look at his arms. Put your arms all the way down. His arms almost go down to his knees. It's gross.
I
It's
got
gross
fitted
looking.
for suits once, and the guy literally said he measured me my inseam, and then he measured my armpit to wrist, and then he did it like 3 times, like he was making a mistake, and then he looked at me and he goes, "You got short legs." I go, "Yeah, no shit."
If you grew a thick, bushy, dark mustache, you would be the Puerto Rican Tom Selleck. That's who you would be. That's who
Hey,
you would.
he's cop and a half, not me.
That's who you would be. Instead of being on Blue Bloods, it would be some Spanish version.
Guys, I'm happy that we got to do this and the thing didn't just fly into the sun and crater.
Yeah, it worked.
I'm pumped that we got our ideas out there because realistically, I don't care about post-draft takes. I don't care about hot takery about, I was right and I said the thing a couple weeks ago. I called this pick. You're all crap. Everything's bullshit, and we are going to have a Mocking the Mocks draft podcast next week, where after the draft is over, we can all revel in the failure of other people who thought they were smart enough to put their opinion on where a mock draft like, this was my mock draft, and look at how smart I am. We're going to have fun at your expense, because that's what we do. We're mean, and we punch down.
That's what you do, man.
I
love it.
But for tonight, we got to get the hell out of here. Chris, I feel really good going into draft eve, don't you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Chris, are you sated? Are you ready for tomorrow night?
You gonna be all right?
I feel so much better after having this conversation.
I'm ready to rock.
I feel
and
like I've
roll.
exercised all my demons and I'm ready to move forward.
Now we're having a big party at my house tomorrow. There's gonna be over 30 people there. Kids are going away. They're going to my mom and dad's. We're gonna have a good time. It's gonna be a late night. If the Bills trade up from 28 to 20 and we draft a defensive tackle, I will slowly, quietly go to bed. I won't say anything to anyone. You guys can stay at my house, leave. You can go through all my stuff, whatever you want. And other than that, I think that's the worst case scenario is them drafting up for a defensive player.
Chris, what's your
Please
worst case scenario?
don't do it.
We already went over it. If they take a defensive player with their first 2, maybe 3 picks, I need all offense.
You're
We
my
got to
man.
beat Mahomes and Burrow. We can't focus on trying to stop them.
That's the
Let's
way. That's
beat
the
these
correct way to
motherfuckers.
think.
My
He's
worst case scenario is trading up into the 10s. That's a mistake.
right. Yeah, that would be.
Don't
bad.
do that. Don't give away future assets. This team needs to get deeper, needs to get more
Let
exotic.
me ask you this: will you trade up from 28 to 20 with Pittsburgh?
Okay.
And it costs you both your seconds next year.
Okay.
Would you do it for Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah.
if he falls to there?
Well, yeah, because now you're talking about seconds. I don't give a fuck about that.
All right, I'm with you. And it's offense.
Guys, we've had a lot of fun here tonight.
Look at that
This
Sam
has
Hartman
worked
picture.
somehow, some way. This whole thing worked. Somehow, some way, a bunch of people watched us live, got to have their commentary heard. I can't wait to do a whole bunch more of this during the off season, where we get to interact with the fans while we're doing the podcast.
I want to meet you,
And
Mario.
it's not this. It's
I
not
want to see
this
you talk
Twitter
shit
Spaces.
to Drew to his face. I love it.
It's not this Twitter Spaces BS that keeps crashing and won't work with iPhones. And I don't understand it. I'm not a producer type. He is. But I'm happy it landed tonight, but we got to get the hell out of here. I'm Drew Garrett. That's Chris Kruger. That's Doug Relosky. And this has been your Rock Pile Report. We'll see you on the other side of the NFL draft.